morning, good afternoon, good evening. Tonight, I would like to comment on an important, interesting article uh, by Paul Hutting about Botswana. And in this article, he says that Botswana is heading for a meltdown. From miracle to meltdown, Botswana's collapse is no longer a warning. It's a prototype. That's the title of the article. And in his first item, he says Botswana wasn't supposed to fall, but it did. For 6 decades, Botswana stood as the poster child of Africa stability. No coups, no hyperinflation, no dictatorship, and the diamond industry was their mainstay. Western analysts worshipped it as proof that Africa could work. But by mid 2025, the illusion is shattered. Botswana is now spiraling through a deep economic crisis, a fractured society, border security collapse, and a leadership vacuum that no election can fix. This is no longer just a collapse. It's a case study of what happens when demography, dependence, and dogma combine. Then, a mouthful.
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. Indeed, it is a mouthful. But I mean, look, let's look at the positive. For 6 decades, here is a country that is mainly a desert. It has but one mineral in its, that they own as a country, and they have been able to stabilize their country and enjoy that one mineral as a people for 6 decades. That's a lifetime. You know, we should look at that. They did marvelously well. It's just unfortunate that, you know, circumstances have not been favorable for them. But if we look at the positives again, why have they been able to sustain thus far? And the answer is within within the text there, to say they had no coups, they had no dictatorships, they use, it's a prime example of democracy. And with democracy, even the harshest conditions, you have a fighting chance.
I think it is tragic that Botswana's golden age, if you want, is being seriously challenged. And I sincerely hope that the country is going through a difficult patch and it will recover. But I think there are important lessons here to be learned by countries like Zimbabwe. The first important point here is that Botswana did have 6 decades of political stability, although there wasn't much economic development. there cannot be any denying that as much as they manage their resource, the diamonds, very well, this problem was coming. If it had happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago, what we are seeing in Botswana would have occurred. In other words, Botswana's economic meltdown was caused by the price of diamonds collapsing. That has been the root cause of Botswana's economic collapse. They have enjoyed economic prosperity throughout this period because the price of diamonds had been very stable. But the minute the price of diamonds started having problems, the country's economy also suffered. That is what this article is all about. And I think the important lesson to be learned here is the over-reliance on a country's natural resources. In Zimbabwe, in 1980, it is widely believed that the country had 30% of its GDP was being generated from industry. In other words, Zimbabwe was one of the well-industrialized countries in Africa in terms of GDP contribution. And now when we look at Zimbabwe today, most of those industries have all but collapsed. The country is now specializing in exporting minerals. And we don't even add value to them. Our gold, we mine it and ship it without even making jewelry on it. Diamonds, the same thing. Lithium, platinum. Our roads are in a terrible state because the country is exporting most of its minerals without even being processed in any way. I think that is an important lesson for Zimbabwe to learn.
Now, I have to agree with you there. Look, like I said before, Botswana had just the one mineral, and that was about it. It's very difficult for a country like Botswana to industrialize like South Africa or Zimbabwe, who themselves have vast diversity in terms of mineral wealth. These countries, we're talking of copper, lithium, steel, iron, everything, gold, platinum, they have. So they can afford to industrialize, heavily, whereas Botswana could not. But we should say, for a country that had just the one mineral wealth and they are doing better than, for example, Zimbabwe. They have been doing better than Zimbabwe for the past 40 years. We have to give them credit to say what was working to have sustained them up to this point in time. And it all comes down to democracy. They had a system that worked for the people and was by the people. They, democracy gives you a change of ideas. If something doesn't work, we simply boot it out and get something new, fresh ideas. Now, you find in Zimbabwe, for example, there has been ZANU-PF since independence until now. They reshuffle amongst themselves. Today, the same, a guy can be Minister of Health. In the next 5 years, he is, chief accountant, is working Minister of Finance. The next thing, he's at education. The next thing is transport, and so forth and so forth. The same guy recycling the same dead wood. That is why you find that Zimbabwe has never progressed, yet Botswana has sustained because of democracy. So for me, it still comes down to say democracy is the key ingredient to what has kept Botswana, stable for all these years. And it is a democracy that will still see them through. Because here we have a new young, president that has come in. He has identified, he's talked about the problems, he has admitted to say we need to change focus. We need to start industrializing. We need to start producing our own food, for example, because most of everything was being imported from South Africa. But he has acknowledged that there is a problem. And for me, somebody that acknowledges that there is a problem is already halfway fixed it, is already halfway addressed it. Whereas again, you go and look at the opposite, Zimbabwe. They have not admitted there's a problem. And yet the problem is there for everybody to see. So they have not acknowledged the problem. They are not going to fix the problem. So you find that probably Botswana will probably get out of this mess and Zimbabwe will stick with it. That is the difference between the two.
Well, according to the writer, one of the items he picked up is a popularist economy with no industry. With diamond revenue shrinking, the government had two choices: reform the tax base, diversify exports, and attract industrial investment, or print promises, subsidize idleness, and gamble on ideology. They chose the second. Minimum wage laws were hiked despite inflation. Public sector hiring surged without productivity. New social grants were issued without revenue. And by the second quarter of 2025, Botswana's budget deficit hit 7.9% of GDP. Treasury bonds were downrated by Modi and Finch, and no major foreign firm announced new operations in over 18 months. These are the economic realities, the consequences of the decision. There is no doubt that the present government in Botswana has been more about being popular than making the right decisions. As much as one would want to say they want free education, free this, free health, subsidized welfare for the poor, etc., you have to have the economic sense to realize that those things have got to be paid. And so to some extent, there is some truth in saying the popularist government has chosen promises, to print promises, subsidize idleness, and gamble on ideology. My only comment on that is that Botswana being a democratic country, the people of Botswana will realize that as much as it was not this government's fault that the prices of diamonds collapsed. They may have made the situation worse by pursuing populist policies at the expense of destabilizing the economy. When your budget deficit starts soaring and your treasury bonds are being down rated, your economy is in trouble. And that is exactly the point when you should not be increasing your expenditure that is not related to economic productivity. That is an important lesson to be learned. And in a democracy, one can only hope that the people themselves will realize that this was not the right decision. They can learn from it and they can elect a new government that is prepared to face the economic challenges that the country faces without destabilizing it.
It is quite unfortunate that, here comes a new kid on the block and takes over, from the old guard. But unfortunately, they meet these, unexpected, you know, turn of events where the diamond industry is not doing particularly well, and this was, and this still is the only mineral that you heavily rely on. It's quite unfortunate. But again, I come to the point that I've had a chance to listen to the president of Botswana speak, and he again acknowledged that things are not well for the country, particularly in this diamond industry. And he has gone to suggest to say, why don't we try and get rid of the middleman and deal direct with the buyers of diamonds? Acknowledging a problem is halfway solving it. It may not be the best solution, but at least now you have put on your thinking caps to say, how can we solve this problem? And then you look at across the border, Zimbabwe, there has been no such acknowledgement. Here is Zimbabwe that is a textbook case of bad governance and, you know, the opposite of what was described in the article. Dictatorship, everything, the works. They are working towards the Vision 2030 that is not there. So the other one, Botswana is acknowledging they have a problem and they are willing to work towards fixing that problem. And you have Zimbabwe that is a problem, but they still say there is no problem. We are okay. We are the happiest people, you know, this side of heaven. That is a big difference. And I say there's a possibility that Botswana will get itself out of this mess. I mean, every country goes through, you know, a downhill, but are you going to rise up again from the ashes? And I think Botswana will do something about it because the mere fact that they have acknowledged that there is a problem is halfway solving it. And Zimbabwe, unfortunately, I don't think anytime soon we could see that until we get ourselves out of the political mess that we are facing currently.
My final remark on this one is mostly focusing on the political and economic realities that many Zimbabweans who are now living in Botswana must be facing. Unemployment in Botswana has soared. And with these economic problems, the country will have its own economic problems and social problems that comes with it. And there's no doubt that the hundreds of thousands of people, of Zimbabweans who have found Botswana as a refugee destination will be forced to reconsider their position. That is one of the downside problems. Because without any doubt, whenever a country is facing a serious economic downturn, one of the problems that always arise is the friction between the local people and the foreigners. I've said unemployment in Botswana among the youth is supposed to have soared to about 38%, according to the writer. And therefore, then, those Zimbabweans in that country will find themselves hard-pressed to find any jobs. And those who have jobs will be resented by the locals because they will think they are the ones who took away their jobs. So there is a serious challenge for Zimbabweans. And in my view, that should galvanize the Zimbabweans in Zimbabwe or outside to seriously start looking for a solution to Zimbabwe's teething economic and political problem. Zimbabwe's economic crisis and political crisis has lasted 45 years and counting. Zimbabwe's economic downturn started soon after independence. We have been in decline ever since. And as for the political repression, it started soon after independence too. Many people know of the 1983 to 1987 Gukurahundi massacre, where nearly 20,000 Zimbabweans, innocent Zimbabweans, were murdered by ZANU-PF operatives. It is hard to call them the army because most institutions in Zimbabwe have been corrupted to the point where they are ZANU-PF in all but name. So the political repression has been there soon after independence and is still there to this day. The economic mismanagement and criminal waste of resources, human and material resources, has always been there since independence in 1980. And this is the reason why so many Zimbabweans have left the country to go to South Africa, Botswana, and many other countries in the region and beyond. But when you have got problems, as is happening in Botswana, the pressure on those people to go back to Zimbabwe cannot be understated. And this is why, to me, the most important lesson to be learned about what is happening in Botswana is that the people of Zimbabwe should sort out their economic and political problem ASAP, as soon as possible. We don't want to sour our relationship between Zimbabweans and the people in Botswana to the same level as we have seen up in South Africa. But the longer we allow the situation where many Zimbabweans have to cross the border to Botswana as economic or political refugees, the greater the chances that this problem will arise. Thank you very much. Ben, do you want to give your closing remarks?
In closing, I have to agree with you, because Zimbabwe has been doing so badly for a very long time. We have seen a lot of Zimbabweans moving out of the country, going to neighboring countries. For example, it is said that there is over 3 million Zimbabweans that are staying or trying to make a living in South Africa. And we have seen, these past few months that all these people that are there have put, a heavy burden on South Africa itself, because now it's Zimbabweans that are using up, the country's healthcare, taking, obviously they take the jobs in there and so forth. This has not, sit down well with the South Africans there, and they have been fighting back. So now there's tension between Zimbabweans in South Africa and South Africans in their country. And we wouldn't want to see, the same thing like you said in Botswana, because we know there are a lot of Zimbabweans in Botswana. And Botswana right now, as we have mentioned, is not doing well. It really does not want to carry the burden, Zimbabweans' burden. And if it is not addressed, we will see at some point the people of Botswana fighting Zimbabweans to say, there is a problem, you guys are the problem, and this will lead to tensions now almost all over SADC. So what I think is Zimbabwe's problem needs to be addressed, like you said again, such that at least we have the problems that are there that can be managed, than letting, problems that could be solved just run riot and escalate situations even further. So I would like to say, Zimbabweans themselves need to sort out their mess. We need to do the right thing for our country, and let us not be a burden to others. And also, we would like to ask help from SADC itself. They know that Zimbabwe has an existing problem, and they should also help us help ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben, and those who were able to join us. Thank you very much for joining us. In future, we would want to facilitate those listening who may wish to raise a point to send us their comments, and we'll also provide you at the link so that if you also want to join in the discussion, you'll be able to do so. Thank you again for joining us tonight. We'll meet again the usual time, 7 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time. Good night.